Hey everyone, it's Emily and I'm here to do a mid-month February mid-month February wrap-up. I've read 5 books so far in the month of February, and I think that's a really good place to actually do a wrap-up because I feel like I'll be able to go a little bit more in depth instead of waiting to the end of the month. I typically do a mid-month wrap-up, and if I ever don't get the chance to, I usually regret it by the time the wrap-up comes up at the end of the month. So so as I said, I've read 5 books. I have mostly liked them, but let's just jump right in and start with the first one that I finished, which was for a feminist book club that I go to locally here, and we read Conversations with Friends by Sally Rooney. I didn't really like this one at all. So this follows a couple of women who they used to date, they don't date at the start of the novel, but they're still friends, and they meet and another couple who are kind of in their circle, and it's just about the relationship between these 4 people. And I don't know how much is on the blurb because I listened to this audibly. There was a long wait at the library and it wasn't on script, so I actually used an Audible credit to get the audiobook. So I don't know how much is in the blurb or how much to spoil, but I will say that the kind of storyline that this follows isn't really one that I tend to enjoy or be drawn to anyway. So there is that, but yeah, I didn't particularly connect with the writing style. It was kind of a lot of short, choppy sentences, and I felt like most of those sentences weren't particularly relevant for character development or plot development. They just kind of were there, and I was like, why was that sentence included? Okay. And that also kind of affected the way I felt about the characters, I think. I thought the characters were kind of one-dimensional to me. There was some representation happening that I thought could have been explored in a really cool way, but just wasn't, and the characters just really fell flat to me. So there was 2 women in a relationship who used to be in a relationship. One, I don't think she actually specifies that she's bisexual or kind of puts that label, but she is romantically, sexually attracted to both men and women. I believe one of the other main characters is attracted to women. There's some chronic illness representation. So there's some cool stuff and interesting stuff happening, but that didn't translate into me being interested in the characters. I felt like they were pretty dislikable characters, which is fine. I can like some dislikable main characters as long as they're still interesting to read about and hopefully learn something throughout the story, but I didn't really like any of the main characters. They didn't really learn anything throughout the story. They weren't interesting for me to follow. So overall was pretty bored by the story. I didn't really care about what was happening or who it was happening to. So not a favorite. I then read The Merciful Crow. This is the Fairy Loot edition and the artwork on the reverse of the dust jacket. But this is The Merciful Crow by Margaret Owen. And I actually really enjoyed this one. I was surprised. I had kind of lowered my expectations, and maybe that's why I enjoyed it a little bit more. I had heard some really mixed reviews of this one, so I was a little bit nervous going into it, but I was really pleasantly surprised. So this follows a world where there are different castes, and the castes are kind of named after different birds. So the crow caste is the lowest, and they are the only caste that is immune from a disease that's affecting all of the others, and so they're tasked with the responsibility of cleaning up the dead of the people in the other castes who have been affected by this disease. And the story starts off with them, with a group of crows who are going to the palace to collect a couple of people, and it wasn't until our main character gets there that she realizes they're there to get the prince and the prince's bodyguard / double, and they get them out of the city, and she realizes that they're not dead, that they have just arranged this with a group of crows, and the leader of that group, they've just arranged this so that they could get out of the palace because the prince's stepmother is trying to kill him, and so is trying to sneak out of the palace and try to make his way to some political allies so that he can figure out what to do and figure out how to gain power back from his stepmother. And so that's how the story starts off. I thought it was just a super fun, interesting, unique world that I could kind of picture very vividly. I really enjoyed the writing. I really liked our main character. I don't know, there was just something about her I really loved. She was super spunky, and she just really cared about her people and really cared about just making sure that crows didn't have to fight to survive every day. And so this one talks a lot about, you know, the caste system in this world, privilege, and her interactions with, you know, the prince and his privileged bodyguard were definitely very interesting. They use teeth are part of the magic system in this, which I thought was super interesting. So I had a lot of fun she's a crow witch, and so I had a lot of fun seeing her learn more about the magic in this world. It was just, yeah, I just had a good time listening to this, and I listened to it on audio and enjoyed the narrator. I will say that I wasn't 100% sold. There's a romantic element in here. It's not a huge part of the plot by any means, but there's a romantic element, and I wasn't 100% sold. It's generally very hard to sell me on romances, and if it's a side plot, I usually like it to be a side plot because I just think there are can be other more interesting things going on. But if it is a side plot, that usually means that there's not as much time put to it, and it just makes it that much harder to use very little space in the story to really sell you on a connection between two characters that's supposed to be very, very deep and romantic. And so I didn't 100% enjoy the romantic element in here, but it was still cute and fun, and it wasn't enough of, you know, a deterrence to make me not enjoy the story overall. I still overall thought the pacing was pretty good. There were a couple of slow places, but it always picked back up. So I thought the pacing was super fast, but we still had time to kind of get to know a lot of these characters. And yeah, I just ultimately had a lot of fun with this story. And I'm now really looking forward to the next one coming out at some point this summer. Maybe August? I'll need to double check the date, but I'm looking forward to the next one coming out. I then read A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. I freaking loved this book. So I listened to the audiobook while reading it physically for the most part. There was a chunk at the end that I only listened to audibly. But for most of the story, I actually was listening and physically reading and making some annotations. And there was so much I loved about this story. So this follows Kel. And Kel is someone who's able to travel between 4 different parallel Londons that have varying levels of magic in them, and he is pretty unique in his ability to travel between these Londons. Not many people can do that, and he, you know, occasionally smuggles a thing between a few of the Londons, and just kind of something he's done. And he ends up getting in over his head when he thinks he's smuggling something that is just another typical thing he might smuggle, and realizes that it's a very powerful piece of magic, and the novel kind of goes from there. And he comes across Lila, who I absolutely adore. I freaking love Lila in this story. And she is in Grey London, which is a London that doesn't have a lot of magic, but she still kind of has an affinity to magic that Kel can't quite understand or put his finger on. But she's still definitely someone who is drawn to magic, and magic is kind of drawn to her in interesting ways. And so it's about them, how they meet, and kind of how their stories get intertwined together, and how they have to get out of various situations after he smuggles this thing into a different London. And it was just so much fun. It was just such a ride, and I absolutely love the characters. I really like Kel. Lila was absolutely my favorite. I love her. I just love really spunky, like, female characters, and she was just not taking shit from anybody. Part of the reason I think that she was able to do a lot in terms of magic was because she just believed in herself, and she knew that she could do anything she set her mind to. And that kind of became a very important part of how she interacted with magic, which I really appreciated. I just really appreciate the way Kel really comes to rely on Lila. And, you know, it's just such a super fast-paced story. There's always something going on. And I think the parts that aren't explored as much in this one are probably going to be explored in the next two books. So I am very much looking forward to reading the next one. As soon as I finish Strange the Dreamer on audio, I'm almost done with it, I'll be picking up the second one in this series. So very much looking forward to that. I also listened to the second book in this series, Children of Virtue and Vengeance by Tomi Adeyemi. And I enjoyed Children of Blood and Bone. I don't think it was a favorite necessarily, and I think there were some things that I didn't like about this one that I thought were not going to be present in the second one. So I listened to this one on audio. I did really enjoy the narrator a lot, and I thought I was going to enjoy it more than I ended up enjoying it. So the first part, I was kind of excited because it was more focusing on the politics and the world and the magic, which is really what drew me into Children of Blood and Bone. And then as the story continued, I was a little disappointed by the character work in this one. I kind of wanted more character development throughout the story than I think actually happened. And in these discussions of politics, I did think there was some really cool discussions about cycles of violence that happen and kind of why people on different sides of this decided to do what they did and how that continued these cycles of violence, and you know, what it takes and what it costs someone to try to break those cycles of violence, or to try to be someone who, you know, tries to mediate between these different groups and who are seen as outsiders because they're part of that other group, even though they're trying to broker peace between these different groups. And there were a couple of people on both sides that we follow that are trying to do that and are still kind of cast out as outsiders. And I was hoping that it would kind of go down that track and that these characters would kind of be fleshed out along that storyline, but that wasn't necessarily what happened. And I thought the writing could be a little bit repetitive in places, and I thought it could have gone a little bit deeper in some places. And you know, the characters, they are definitely continuing to develop and learning some things, but some of them are still, yeah, there still definitely are some choices that certain characters make. You're like, but why? And so that can sometimes be really frustrating, but that happens in a lot of fantasies that, you know, need that to move the plot forward. And are sometimes very understandable decisions to make, to be honest. Yeah, so I think that was the focus of the first part of the story. So it's like, okay, this is going in a good direction. I think I'm gonna like this one even more than Children of Blood and Bone. But the second half, I'm not gonna go into any more detail. I'm just gonna say that there were more romantic elements that I was not a fan of at all. And I thought that we were kind of getting away from those parts of the storylines, and I was excited about that. But some of those came back, or some elements, romantic elements, were present in the second part of the story that I didn't really care for at all. And so that was kind of disappointing, and ultimately just kind of made the second half not my favorite. There still was some really cool magic that happened in the second half that I really enjoyed, but the romantic elements just really drew it down for me. So I'm still interested to see what happens in the last one. I think this is going to be a trilogy. Still definitely interested in seeing what happens. I'll probably listen to the last one on audio, but I'm not sure if this will be a favorite series, or I'm not sure if this will be a series I want to reread or keep on my shelves. I'll need to think about it, but we'll see. We'll see what happens in the third one. But the second one was not, overall, not my favorite. There were some strong elements, but those didn't ultimately make it one that I could really say that this was overall a very positive reading experience for me. The last book that I'm going to be talking about today is Slay by Brittany Morris. I read this one physically, and I freaking loved this book. I loved everything about it. So this one follows Kira, who's on the cover here. I freaking love this cover too. But it follows Kira, who is in high school, and she is the developer for an online virtual reality card dueling game. And it's designed to be a safe space for Black folks around the world. And, you know, there are hundreds of thousands of people at the point the story starts. You know, there are hundreds of thousands of people who use this game and really enjoy it, and it's just kind of this really well developed game when the story starts. And you're introduced to a bunch of, you know, the characters in Kira's life. You're introduced to her boyfriend, her sister, some of her sister's friends, and the side characters I thought were really well developed and interesting. And then one day Kira finds out that someone in real life was actually murdered over a disagreement with someone else over the game. And so no one knows at this point that she's the developer of this game. She's kept her identity hidden. But when this happens, she needs to kind of ultimately face some things. This game is being called racist. There's a lot of really negative stuff that's being discussed about this game publicly. And so she ultimately needs to kind of confront what's going on. And she really relies on, you know, a co-developer and co-coder who she interacts with a lot. I really, really loved her character as well. And I thought there were a lot of really interesting and nuanced discussions of just the experience of, you know, Black people in the United States and around the world. And of course this is coming from a white person. So I'm gonna leave, so I was already had this book on my radar before I saw Jessie from Botes and Books talk about this, but I'll leave their Black Girl Magic vlog where they talked about Slay, because that one really, really got me excited to read this. And I think that one's going to be a much better Own Voices review of this book. But I thought there was some really interesting, nuanced discussions about code switching, you know, racism, and discussions about what it means to have a safe place and how important those spaces are to different communities. And, you know, I thought those discussions were really interesting and well done. And the world was so cool. The game was so cool, and it was really, really cool to get to explore the game in this book. And I thought that was also an element that was really well done and super interesting. And you follow a few other perspectives kind of sprinkled throughout here, but it's primarily Kira's perspective. And I think those other perspectives really added something to kind of get a different context for some other things that are happening that Kira's not going to be aware of. I will say I did see, as soon as this storyline started, I kind of called something that was a twist. So I definitely saw that coming from a mile away, but that didn't at all deflect from my enjoyment of the story. I love Kira so much. I love her character. I love the other co-developer. I love her sister, her whole family. I love these characters. I love this world. I'm so glad I read this book, and I had such a fun time reading it, and I think this one is something that anyone I think could enjoy, and hope you pick it up. That's it. Those are the 5 books I've read so far in the month of February. Let me know if you've read any of these books or if you're excited about any of these books. I am continuing to read some more from authors of color throughout Blackathon, and, you know, some of those obviously were not from authors of color, but it just kind of depends on when the audiobooks become available at my library. But I'm so excited for the rest of what I have in store for February, so be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss out on the rest of what I read throughout the month. And yeah, as I said, let me know if you've read any of these or what you're reading for Blackathon, or just in general what you're reading throughout February. I'll be sure to link my Twitter and Instagram down below. That's where I like to hang out. I'll also link my climate channels and social media platforms below as well if you're interested, and I'll see you in the next one.